Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and pull out the most interesting bits of knowledge and insight just for you.
And this week's stack comes courtesy of the Pythonist programmer. She's a software engineering consultant. And these are the articles that grabbed her attention over the weekend.
That's right. We've got quite a mix today. Tech's moving fast. Global dynamics are shifting. There's even stuff on fashion business and, just human nature.
So our goal is really to connect those dots, see what insights pop out about navigating, well, everything that's changing so quickly.
Okay, let's get into it.
Let's unpack the stack.
All right, first up, let's look at the digital underbelly, security, surveillance, scams, that kind of thing. We're starting with a really high-profile case.
Yeah, this one involves potential deepfakes used in a phishing campaign, and the target was apparently Susie Wiles, the Trump White House chief of staff.
Wow, okay, so what happened exactly?
Well, the reports say fraudulent messages, even phone calls, went out to people on her contact list.
And do they know how the list was obtained?
That's still a bit unclear, actually. Could have been a phone hack, maybe scraped from public info or data brokers. They're still looking into it.
But the deepfake part, that's the really worrying bit, isn't it?
Exactly. Some people who got calls said the voice sounded, well, eerily like Wiles. The officials involved in the probe apparently suspect AI voice cloning tools were used.
Which would make this potentially one of the biggest deepfake phishing incidents we've seen, right?
Yeah, seems like it. Especially targeting someone at that level.
And the motives. What did the FBI find?
A bit of a mix, according to the source. Some attempts seemed political, like asking a member of Congress for a pardon list, believe it or not.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And others were just straight up financial scams, trying to get cash transfers.
But not foreign governments.
Apparently not. The FDI reportedly ruled that out. So it looks more like a, standard, albeit sophisticated, cybercriminal fraud scheme, just with a very high-level target.
One source really hammered home the security awareness angle here.
Right. Jake Williams, a former NSA hacker, quoted in the article, basically called it an embarrassing level of security awareness.
Ouch.
Yeah. His point was that this kind of garden variety social engineering, as he put it, happens all the time. Top officials should absolutely expect it and be ready.
So even with fancy deepfake tech, it still comes down to basic awareness and maybe not clicking that link or trusting that call implicitly.
Pretty much. And the source even mentioned using secure, verified messaging tools, something like Signal, for independent authentication. Simple, but maybe effective.
Okay. And that same source mentioned a couple of other big security things briefly.
It did. There was an update on the 2019 Baltimore ransomware attack. Remember that one? Huge municipal disaster.
Vaguely, yeah. Part of the Robin Hood campaign.
Exactly. An Iranian man, Sina Golinejad, pleaded guilty for his role.
How do they catch him?
That's the mystery the article points out, how he was identified or even why he was in the U.S., given that these guys usually stay in non-extradition countries. Lots of unanswered questions there.
Interesting. And the other big one?
Oh, the leak out of Russia. Apparently over 2 million documents.
2 million. What kind of documents?
Blueprints, security details
No.
for their nuclear facilities, just found exposed in a public database.
No way.
Yeah. Experts called it a massive security breach. Site plans, camera locations, alarm systems, apparently all just out there.
That's staggering. Just a basic mistake leading to that kind of exposure.
Seems like it. Shows how even critical infrastructure can be vulnerable to, well, fundamentally poor digital hygiene.
Okay, shifting slightly from direct crime to surveillance tech, license plate readers.
Right. The concern highlighted is how these cameras and the huge databases they create can be, quote, weaponized.
And there was a specific example.
A pretty troubling one from Johnson County, Texas. The sheriff's office reportedly searched this huge network, 83,000 flock cameras, looking for a woman who allegedly had a self-administered abortion.
Why were they looking for her?
The sheriff said it was out of concern for her safety, but experts like Eva Galperin from the EFF see it very differently.
How so?
She called it a clear example of the sprawling dragnet these systems create and how they could potentially be used to track people seeking abortions or, exercising other rights.
Yeah, you can see the potential for misuse there.
Yeah.
Okay, one more from this section, a big scam operation.
Uh-huh. The U.S. government sanctioned a Philippines-based company, Funnel Technology, and its boss, Lou Lizzie.
What were they doing?
Linked to over $200 million in losses for U.S. victims. They apparently facilitated scam websites, often for those pig butchering scams.
Right, those are the ones where they build trust, often romantically, then lure people into fake investments.
Exactly. Funnel apparently bought up IP addresses from major cloud providers and then sold them specifically to criminals running these kinds of scams.
So they were like infrastructure providers for fraudsters.
Pretty much, yeah. It really shows how these digital threats are layered, you know, from deepfakes targeting individuals to mass surveillance potential and these large-scale criminal enterprises using legitimate cloud services.
It definitely paints a complex picture. Requires vigilance on all fronts.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears now.
Mm-hmm.
From the threats using tech to the evolution of AI itself. One source dug into how the big voices in AI have, well, changed their tune on regulation pretty dramatically.
Oh, yeah, it's stark. You just have to look at Sam Altman's Senate appearances. Remember May 2023, right after ChatGPT exploded?
Yeah, the message was basically regulate us, wasn't it?
Totally. He talked about big risks, the need for strong laws, called it printing press moment, needing guardrails. Very serious tone.
And now, fast forward 2 years to May 2025.
The hearing's called Winning the AI Race, and Altman's message is completely flipped. Unleash us.
Unleash us.
Yep. Arguing overregulation would be disastrous.
Yeah.
Asking the government to invest in me, provide space to innovate and move quickly. Safety's still mentioned, but qualified, sensible regulation that does not slow us down.
Wow, that's quite the pivot. What drove that, according to the source?
Couple of things. One, the initial panic after ChatGPT kind of died down. But crucially, the source points to the return of the Trump administration, which favors a pro-growth AI policy.
Influenced by people who see regulation as basically getting in the way of innovation.
Exactly. And the AI race with China is framed as the absolute key driver now. Like, U.S. policy is all about winning that race. Safety be damned, as the source puts it rather bluntly.
Quite a contrast to the EU, right? They seem more focused on transparency and accountability rules.
Yeah, very different approaches. And the source even mentioned a recent U.S. House bill proposing a 10-year ban on state-level AI laws. Basically clearing the decks for federal inaction or maybe industry-friendly action.
So what does the industry actually want now?
The source breaks it down. Freedom to innovate, obviously. Strong export controls, interestingly. And this key phrase, freedom to learn.
Freedom to learn. What does that mean in practice?
It's basically asking to redefine intellectual property. They want training AI models on copyrighted material to be considered fair use.
Meaning they wouldn't have to pay creators for the data they use to train these massive models.
Essentially, yes. OpenAI and Microsoft were mentioned as pushing for this specifically.
Is everyone on board with this unleash us vibe?
Well, there's one glaring exception noted in the source, Anthropic.
Ah, right. They're still focused on safety.
Very much so. Still urgently calling for effective regulation to reduce catastrophic risks. They're warning the window for proactive risk prevention is closing fast. So definitely not everyone shares the same optimism about just letting things rip.
Makes sense. Crafting AI laws is hard, obviously. But did the source suggest any specific regulations that wouldn't necessarily slow things down too much?
It did mention a few possibilities experts often discuss. Things like banning AI for mass surveillance, banning deceptive deepfakes, tackling AI discrimination, mandating clear disclosure when you're interacting with an AI, not a human, and strengthening personal data protection. Stuff that addresses specific harms without necessarily throttling core research.
Gotcha. Okay, moving from policy debates to the actual tech, another source talked about how physics is helping make AI faster and smarter.
Yeah, this is really cool stuff from Rose Yu's work on physics-guided deep learning.
Physics-guided? How does that work?
The basic idea is, instead of having a neural network learn everything just from data, which can take ages and tons of examples, you actually build known principles of physics into the AI's structure or training.
So you give it a head start, basically, using rules we already know about how the world works.
Exactly. It makes the AI more accurate, more efficient, especially for modeling complex real-world things like, say, traffic or weather.
Did the source give examples?
Oh, yeah, some gray wings. She improved traffic predictions, modeling traffic like it was fluid dynamics, using graph theory, too. Her model went from predicting 15 minutes ahead reliably to a full hour.
Wow. And that was actually used.
Deployed by Google Maps, apparently.
Impressive. What else?
Speeding up turbulence simulations. This is super important for climate models, hurricane predictions, things like that. Really computationally heavy stuff.
How much faster?
Her models got speed ups of 20 times for 2D simulations, and get this, 1,000 times faster for 3D.
1,000 times. That's insane.
Right, huge difference. She's also using this for things like stabilizing drones by modeling propeller turbulence and even tackling plasma turbulence for fusion power research.
So really practical, hard problems.
Definitely. And her group is even developing AI that can try to discover physics principles like symmetries just by looking at data. Potential to find new physics, maybe.
So does she see AI replacing scientists then?
No, not at all. Her vision is something she calls AI scientist, but it's not one single super AI. It's more like an ensemble of computer programs.
Like digital lab assistants.
Exactly. Working in partnership with humans. The goal is to take away the drudgery, she says.
Like what kind of drama?
Literature reviews, for example. Sifting through thousands of papers. An AI could supposedly do that during a single lunch break.
Okay, I can see the appeal there.
Right. So humans can focus on the creative aspects, the insights, the hypotheses. It's about integration, making humans more effective, not replacing them.
That makes sense. And that idea of integration, of humans working with AI, it connects to another concept from the sources, right? This idea of the coming age of wisdom work.
Precisely. As AI gets better and better at knowledge work, processing data, finding patterns, doing calculations, the real human value shifts. It shifts towards wisdom work.
And what does wisdom work involve?
According to Joe Hudson, who's cited in the source, it's about the stuff AI can't do. Emotional clarity, discernment, real human connection, ethical judgment, understanding context, making nuanced calls, building relationships.
The uniquely human skills.
Exactly. And interestingly, the source notes some tech giants are apparently already investing in training these kinds of skills in their workforce, recognizing that shift is coming.
It's funny how AI is even changing how we see human things. Like that example about the M-dash.
Oh yeah, that was amusing. The M-dash, the long dash used to be just a stylistic choice. Now, because some AI models use it a lot, it's becoming seen as sort of an AI's calling card.
Blurring the lines in unexpected ways.
Totally. And it connects to things like the discussion around GitHub's Copilot, the AI coding assistant. The CEO, Thomas Stomke, has talked about getting developers to trust it.
Right. But it raises that question of vibe coding, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Are developers just generating code based on AI suggestions, kind of feeling their way through it without maybe deeply understanding why it works or how it fits? That's a potential issue for building really solid software.
So yeah, AI is pushing boundaries everywhere, from policy fights and physics labs right down to how we work and even how we write.
It's reshaping things incredibly quickly.
Okay, let's move into our last section. Broadening out a bit to the human and economic landscape. Navigating uncertainty. One source focused on efforts to preserve queer history.
Specifically, this online book club called Queer History 101. It's co-led by Hugh Ryan, a queer historian, and Miss Peppermint from Drag Race.
And the source framed this as a response to current events.
Yeah, pretty directly. As a response to actions by the current administration that are described as trying to systematically wipe away aspects of trans history, health info, autonomy, even affecting places like Stonewall. And it also mentioned companies pulling back on DEI efforts.
So the book club is about pushing back against that erasure.
Exactly. Learning from the past. Michael Bronski, another historian mentioned, put it really well. He said past queer communities were smart because they figured out how to navigate systems of oppression that are still here.
So there are lessons in that history for today's challenges.
That's the core idea. They want to share those stories of resilience and resistance.
And how does the book club work? Is it just lectures?
No, it sounds quite interactive. It's virtual with video episodes, live chats, a Discord community they call the Kiki. And they're not just doing dense academic stuff. They've broadened the genres to make it more accessible. Building community is just as important as sharing the history itself.
The community aspect is interesting. Did this source talk about how technology changes that?
It did. The organizers felt that while social media is great for, getting the word out quickly, it can sometimes lack the deep interpersonal relationships that fueled earlier movements.
So efficiency versus depth.
Kind of.
Yeah.
They argue real community needs that sense of being together, even if it's virtual. That goes beyond just surface-level online connections.
And this connects to preserving history too, right? In the digital age.
Yeah, that was another key point. It's so easy to record things now with phones, but digital stuff is also fragile in its own way. It can be changed, deleted.
Like that quote in the source, what good is it going to be if Amazon could just flick a switch?
Exactly. It raises this question about maybe needing to return to more, quote, analog way of recording history, like that woman Marion Stokes who recorded TV news for decades. Maybe we need some of that tangible preservation, too.
There was also that really interesting thought about erasure.
Oh, yeah, that every act of erasure admits that something was there before.
Right. It's like trying to erase something actually confirms it existed.
It's a powerful reframe. And the source adds, the government has power, sure, but it's just the government. It's not a community.
Hmm.
The real history, the real knowledge lives within the community itself.
Okay, switching gears pretty sharply now to the economy. Another source talked about something surprising. A boom in fashion and beauty M&A deals.
Yeah, seems counterintuitive, right? With all the talk of stock market jitters, recession fears, and Trump's unpredictable trade policies, you'd think companies would be playing it safe.
But they're not.
Apparently not in this sector. The source mentioned 5 major acquisitions just since April: Prada buying Versace, ELF buying Rhode, big names making big moves.
So why now? What's the thinking?
As one analyst, Simeon Siegel, put it, volatile times make for unique opportunities.
Okay, like what kind of opportunities?
A few specific drivers were mentioned. One is bargain hunting. Some brands might be available at a discount right now, maybe partly because of trade policy impacts. Versace, Foot Locker, Skechers were examples given.
Makes sense. Buy low. What else?
Buying power. Some companies have just done really well compared to their peers, have cash on hand, and see a chance to consolidate or expand.
Using their strength.
Right. And then there's the price of inaction. If your competitors are out there making deals and getting stronger, can you really afford to just sit on the sidelines?
Good point. It's risky, though, isn't it? With tariffs and consumer confidence being shaky.
Definitely high risk, high reward. But the potential payoff is huge. The source had another great quote. Heroes are created in years of famine, not years of feast. Bold moves in tough times can really pay off long term.
And the source tied this to other economic news, too.
Yeah, briefly mentioned Trump's tariffs being upheld by a court, Shein having trouble listing publicly and facing an EU probe, how tariffs are affecting forecasts for companies like LVMH, Capri, Abercrombie, Gap, Macy's, and layoffs at Hudson's Bay. It all paints this picture of a really pressured, uncertain economic climate.
Okay, so connecting that uncertainty back to the individual level,
Uh,
another source looked at gifted adults. People who are often successful but still feel unsatisfied.
Right. This perspective comes from a therapist who sees giftedness not just as, being good at school early on, but as a lifelong neurocognitive profile.
Meaning it affects how you think and feel throughout life.
Exactly. And if the specific emotional and cognitive aspects aren't understood or supported, it can lead to challenges later on, even if you look successful from the outside.
What kind of challenges? The source listed some common ones.
It listed 10. A few really stand out. There's underachievement, but felt as a kind of self-betrayal. Like you're doing well by external standards, but you feel you haven't lived up to your own diverse potential.
I see that.
Then there's imposter syndrome. The source links it often to childhood experiences. If things came too easily early on, facing real difficulty later can feel like proof you're a fraud, leading to that constant fear of being exposed.
That sounds exhausting.
Totally. Another is a chronic sense that life lacks depth or meaning. That is this all there is feeling. It's tied to needing a level of intellectual and emotional complexity that everyday life or typical jobs might not offer.
Right. And perfectionism.
Oh yeah, perfectionism that leads to paralysis. Your identity gets so tied up in being perfect that you can't finish things because it's never good enough. It's a defense against shame, basically.
Yeah. What else is on the list?
Social isolation, even if you have friends feeling intellectually or emotionally alone, craving deeper connections, difficulty committing to one career path because you're good at lots of things, that multipotentiality being seen as flaky.
The multi-potentialate struggle.
Yep. And burnout that doesn't look like typical burnout because gifted people can be really good at masking and performing until they just collapse.
Wow. So what's the takeaway then? How do you deal with all that?
The core message, the closing thought from the source, was really about shifting focus from achievement to integration.
Integration over achievement, meaning
Recognizing giftedness as just part of who you are, a tool for insight and connection, not just something you have to constantly perform or prove, using it as a foundation for wholeness, not perfection.
that's a much healthier way to frame it.
Definitely. And maybe this search for wholeness and meaning is even connected to that booming wellness economy the source mentioned $6.3 trillion now.
How so?
Perhaps it's another way people are seeking control, self-improvement, belonging, creating their own rituals or pop-up temples when traditional institutions don't feel trustworthy or fulfilling anymore.
Hmm. Interesting connection. It really feels like all these threads, digital life, AI, economics, personal struggles, are about navigating complexity and uncertainty, doesn't it?
It really does seem to be the underlying theme.
So, wrapping this up, what does it all mean when you put it together? We've seen this digital landscape with serious threats like deepfakes, constant surveillance. We've seen AI charging ahead technically, but huge debates about regulation and human impact.
Yeah, and a business world making surprisingly bold bets despite economic worries. And then individuals and communities trying to preserve history, find meaning, and deal with their own complex inner lives.
So here's maybe the really interesting question, looking across all these sources. How do these things intersect? The speed of AI and tech, the big strategic moves in business and politics, and this very deep human need for meaning, for connection, for understanding ourselves.
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it?
Maybe. So for you, the listener, perhaps the provocative thought to chew on is this. In a world where everything outside feels kind of unstable, where digital information can be, manipulated or just disappear, could focusing inward be the key?
Inward how?
Like focusing on developing our own strategic thinking, building real human connections, and working towards integrating all the complex parts of ourselves. Could that be the most powerful kind of resilience we can build right now?
Integration is resilience. Something to think about.
Definitely. That's our deep dive for today, curated from a really fascinating stack from the Pythonist programmer. Episode sources: AI Reality Check, how the loudest voices in AI went from regulate us to unleash us. How to make AI faster and smarter with a little help from physics. The coming age of wisdom work, human at the center. Trump's administration wants to erase queer history. An unconventional book club is fighting back. Avoiding labor isn't lazy. Neurocomplexity and burnout. Is this all there is? 10 reasons gifted adults often feel unsatisfied. Emerging tech, real impact. How to make AI faster and smarter, with a little help from physics. Digital safety and ethics. A hacker may have deepfaked Trump's chief of staff in a phishing campaign. Brand stewardship and visibility. Why blockbuster deals are back in fashion. Global tech politics. How the loudest voices in AI went from regulate us to unleash us.